Okay, everybody, it's reached 1 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started with some of the presentations. I'd like to thank everybody in the audience and abroad uh, during the webinar broadcast for attending today. I'm Marvin Davis. I'm the GIS coordinator for the city of Oak Hill, and I've been in this position for going on 4 years now in January. And one of the things that has been the goal of our GIS program here is to have a full-fledged municipal GIS that branches through all municipal departments and is able to produce all this information directly to the public and provide a more transparent local government organization. And I will be doing the first talk today, and the title of this presentation is called "It Takes a Village Implementing GIS in Small Cities in West Virginia." And this will just go into brief detail about our beginnings, where we've been, what we have been doing, and what we plan to do in the future. But we're going to base this in the concept of doing local government GIS in other small communities. So this is more or less a case study that you can take and try to apply towards developing your own local government GIS. So just to get into the beginnings of Oak Hill GIS, we started this program back in 2011, and it was spearheaded by our city manager, Bill Hannibas. And the technology was purchased in 2011. It was put under the umbrella of the Oak Hill Police Department. Quickly was realized we need a full-fledged GIS professional to provide the controls to this program. And I was hired in late 2014, and I began work in January of 2015. And since then, a lot of it has just been snowballing in terms of what we've been doing. But in the first year of Oak Hill GIS, it was a lot of discussion, a lot of talking with different employees, different departments, different officials, just talking about what do you want out of this? What do you think you can get out of this? And what do I need to provide you in terms of GIS mapping, technology, and other applications? The other thing that I took care of in the first year was getting our ArcGIS online organization up and going. And that was actually, at the time, a little bit more of a process than it is today. But as of 2015, we have been online since, and we've been doing all of our data collection, our mapping, and our applications through that through that platform. And then late 2015, early 2016, we began to realize, oh, there's a few more things we probably need to do. And one of them was expanding our named user access to our ArcGIS online organization. And the software suite expansion, we were talking more along the lines of adding extension toolbars to allow us to begin to do analytics with our GIS software. And that all began in late 2015 and early 2016. And just to show you some of the technology that we've had access to, we just have a standard Windows 10 PC. We had a Trimble 6000 GPS unit. We had a Galaxy tablet that has been on display today that you've been able to utilize some of the mobile apps on. We have a large format printer and scanner. And the software that we've been using, desktop and pro, we have switched more along the lines to ArcGIS Pro and the ArcGIS apps, Web App Builder, Explorer, Survey 123, and Collector. And just to get into some of the things that we learned through this process is understanding the city's budget and needs and some of these questions to ask. And the first one was, where does this GIS go? And since in 2011, it was put in the police department, the first thing we realized, well, maybe that might not be the best place to put it, because if it's in one department, that might mean that it's only specific to that department. It can't be used in other departments. Like the Public Works Department might not have access to it. The Sanitary Board might not have access to it. And it was made the decision in early 2015 to relocate this GIS to the city manager's office in more of a central role. And then the investing in a GIS professional, and the title was GIS coordinator. And that allowed the professional to coordinate the data needs for each and every department. The next question that we started to think about was, what do we need? And it branched off into two questions. What do we need now? What do we need that can wait? And when you're talking about budget and needs, you might have X number of dollars to spend, and you have to prioritize what you need in your software, what you need in your technology from year to year. And those two questions are very important to ask right away if you're wanting to develop this and be able to understand what to get immediately, what to get 2-3 years down the road. And then finally, the last question, and this was not just a question for me, for our city manager, this was a question for everybody in the city's organization. And it was, what can you do with GIS? What can you do in the sanitary board? What can you do in public works? What can you do here, here, here? And those individual conversations were very critical for what we began to do right away. And it continues to motivate what I do today. And that allowed me to do that foundation work right away and get something started. And then 2-3 years later, I'm able to address more complex needs now, instead of, hey, can you get me a map of the streets? Hey, can you get me a map of the boundary? Hey, can you get me a map of yada, yada, yada? You're thinking of, hey, we need to start talking about how we're going to control construction permit applications. How are we going to start recording code enforcement complaints? How are we going to start doing this and this? And those questions were very critical, just to lay the foundation and then allow us to build from there. And one of the first examples, and I love to show this, is our 311 application that we is now defunct. We do not use it anymore. We've went on to a new application. But the first year in 2016, we began just tracking code enforcement complaints such as junk vehicles, high grass, trash in yards, dilapidated structures were one. And we were talking about expanding this so the public can access it, that the public can put direct input into it. But for now, it was just an internal application. And just to show you how much it was used, this is 2016, this is 2018. This is when we had replaced the application earlier this year. So you see how many points we had generated in that amount of time. And it was mostly through our code enforcement officer. And this is now the new application that we use. And this is Citizen Problem Reporter. This is one of Esri's local government solutions. And it's pretty much an out-of-the-box product that we don't have to do the development on. We just had to configure it and deploy it. And we can now use it to report animal problems, blight problems, trash problems, road problems. And this application is accessible by the public. So it's no longer somebody calling in saying, hey, I got a pothole on my street. They can go directly to this application, mark where that pothole is, and report it directly to us. And we can process it through our system to dispatch it to the correct department and go through the workflow to address that problem. And in real time, the citizen is seeing that workflow happen. So we can now have a direct communication with everybody in Oak Hill. If they have a problem, they can see what's happening to it real time. So the next step, and this gets into a lot of the issues that local governments have with utilizing GIS, and that is maybe they need to do partnerships. Maybe they need to think outside the box on how to make this happen. Because as many know, if you start looking at the price of GIS software, the hardware involved, the professional to run the system, you get what's called sticker shock. You see the price and you think, well, there's no way we can ever make this happen. And that may lead you to think of partnerships at the county the regional level or branch out into private organizations that provide GIS capabilities, or they may do data collection for you. There are several different private companies in West Virginia alone that provide this to us. So that is a lot of things to consider. But when you're considering these partnerships, you also have to think of two big questions. Is there one GIS to rule them all? And to quote Lord of the Rings there a little bit, that means, is this GIS going to be controlled by us, or is it going to be controlled by a third party that we have to have access to constantly to be able to update or to provide information or to access information? And that might not seem that complicated to some, but it is complicated to others. And the second question is, does the city need GIS projects or a daily GIS? At Oak Hill's level, we have really strived to be a daily GIS, and that means that there is constantly a map, data, or something that's being updated on a day-to-day basis. And the big example I always use is our code enforcement, compared to GIS projects, which may be a water line replacement, a sewer project, or maybe a road paving project, which has a definitive beginning and end date to it. And it isn't something that you look at every day from then on. And when we were talking about developing GIS, when I first got here, I am a GIS department of one. I am the city's lone GIS professional. But one of the big things that I have to consider, though, is most municipal GIS departments are one or two people. They can't be several tens or 20s of people that are dedicated just to GIS because budgets won't allow it. The other thing, though, to consider, though, is I might be the only GIS professional, but I'm not the only person here doing GIS work. And I like to consider them non-GIS personnel, but they are doing GIS. And Oak Hill right now has members in each of our departments, in the city manager's office, code enforcement, our public works, our sanitary board, our fire department, and we're working on getting our police involved to get access to our ArcGIS online organization. And we're constantly growing the number of people that are accessing our technology online. And the great thing that you get with access to ArcGIS online is you get access to their suite of apps that are accessible on your mobile device, either a tablet or a phone. And those are free to download to anybody. And you just use the account that you get through ArcGIS online to access them. And the other thing that we also allow this to be is that it lets me be the professional, the manager of the GIS, and I can now take care of the data that's coming in from each and every map. I can manage it, I can produce it, I can make a sweet little viewer for council members to view or the public to view, and they can disseminate that information. And I'm just managing the data, but I have many employees out in the field that are actually collecting it for me, and they're actually producing that information. And when we're talking about smart growth of GIS, one of the big things is you have to understand the landscape. And in West Virginia, a lot of times we're thinking of rural communities, impoverished communities that are not going to have limitless budgets to spend on technology. So one of the things that any community has to look at when they're thinking of GIS is that they have to look at how the budget is going to look for the next fiscal year and the next fiscal year after that, and understanding, okay, what can we do now? What can wait? What can we do with ArcGIS online? What do we need with our desktop licensing? What do we need with this license and this license? And understanding the costs. And one of the things that Oak Hill has benefited from is they've had a very engaged conversation with our account managers at Esri, almost on a day-to-day basis even, to ask them about pricing on certain products, to talk to them about understanding the products we have access to a little bit better, so we can understand that we're getting what we're paying for out of it. And then the other thing, and this has been a big part of my job, is navigating the drivers. And that is keeping city officials and employees informed of what I'm doing with GIS, the innovations that are out there for GIS, and what needs that we have right away and what needs we might have down the road. And the one thing that we found out was, since I started, City Council in almost every meeting has taken up an issue that had a map involved of some sort. It might have been as simple as a map of somebody's parcel of their property. It might be the zoning map. It might be another map that is just very obscure and you wouldn't normally think of. And one of the first things, the first comments I got when I got here was a council member actually told me, he says, if this wasn't on a map, I wouldn't have understood this at all. There was no way I would have understood this anywhere near as well if you'd just sit there and told me about it just verbally, and I wouldn't have had no visual to understand it. And the thing that has really benefited us is that just by producing maps, by providing maps, by keeping open dialogue with officials, the GIS has made the case itself. I really haven't had to go up and on bended knee beg for to keep the program going. They have seen the benefits out of it. They have seen what this can provide them. And one of the things that has really helped with informing council on a month-to-month basis is our council meeting agenda story maps. And this is just a standard story map that allows the user to disseminate each council agenda item, the documentation for each item, but then they also get a map that references where that item is taking place. Now, that might not be necessary for every agenda item, but for most of these agenda items, they have a point on a map or an area on the map that relates to something geographical and something that can be displayed. And it's actually very informative. It's accessible for the public, and it's accessible to all the council members. And on top of that, it works as a good presentation tool for every council meeting. So what you see on the screen is shown at every council meeting. As the meeting goes along, they can see this real time. And one of the questions that I like to end with is, now what? So when we're talking about local government GIS, what's the level of interest in this? And one of the examples I bring out is 2 years ago at the West Virginia Municipal League conference, I was invited to do a small presentation about Oak Hill GIS. And back then, a lot of it was still conceptual. It was stuff that we were planning on working on and getting into. A lot of that stuff we were already up and going now. But you see in the picture, it was a packed room. There was no seats available in that room. That people were coming. They wanted to learn more about what we were doing with GIS and what they could do. And then earlier this year in February, Esri actually came up and made a visit to Oak Hill to discuss with local communities and Oak Hill about what we could do with GIS, what more we could do with GIS, and that just to let us know that we are always going to be here for you guys, that we will work with you guys on trying to get these products up and going and helping you grow your GIS even more. And they've taken it as a point of pride that Oak Hill, as small as we are, we're a city of under 8,000 people, that we are able to utilize GIS in this way, and that they've been trying to use it nationwide as an example. Hey, they can do it, you can too. And it was even brought to my attention at their conference in Charlotte back in the spring. They actually mentioned us in the plenary as one of the cities that are doing big things with their GIS software. And we took that as a very proud moment. But just to wrap this up, there remains a high level. I think those pictures showed it. There's a high level of interest in GIS and to either begin or expand what they're doing with GIS. And there is a need for educational outreach from all sectors. And I'm including private, state, and regional, other local governments, to just talk with people that are interested in doing it and show them that they can do it too. And there is collaboration possibilities between the West Virginia Association of Geospatial Professionals, which is a statewide group of GIS professionals, and then the West Virginia Municipal League, which is, it involves pretty much every municipality in West Virginia. And that collaboration could be key to getting more communities involved into GIS. And I think in the end game is this will produce potential for internship and employment opportunities to grow in West Virginia in this sector. And just to go into some of the future of Oak Hill GIS, some of our ongoing projects, we have out a 3D master plan for Needles Eye Park. I'll be talking more about Needles Eye Park in a little bit. Talking about non-conforming uses in Oak Hill in regards to planning and zoning, our sanitary board sewer network, keeping it updated, mapping for our sewer improvement project. We have that up and going. Our vacant structure registration, we have that up and going and active. Our stormwater network, we are currently continuing to map it. And then we also have the New River Gorge Trail Alliance. We have a 6-county vision map produced for that group, and Oak Hill is part of it. So we are really looking to see that become a reality. And then talking about other future projects, mapping of new trails. We are currently developing new trails within Needles Eye Park that we are needing to map. When we're talking about data acquisition, Lidar, which is for high quality terrain, imagery for aerial imagery, that would be very beneficial to us, either through aerial imagery or using drone technology. And then also getting into what my level of expertise is with 3D geodesign, which is utilizing the software City Engine and allows us to create a 3D model of the world around us, and being able to utilize that model to analyze potential development scenarios and be able to analyze those scenarios in a way that we can understand exactly what we're developing and understanding the impacts of how we're developing it. And we just started this in July. We got the Esri Small Municipal and County Government Enterprise License Agreement, and that has allowed us to greatly expand our username access to our online organization, but it also gives us access to a wide swath of technology for desktop software and online. And this is needed to increase the training of our staff and officials to utilize it. And I'm just naming off some of the departments, the police, fire, city council, other office staff and additional staff, and we're working on getting them trained and up and going with it. Other applications that we have out now, one is a citizen problem reporter that I showed earlier, comprehensive plan survey that we'll be getting to in the near term, having a parks and recreation viewer so we can illustrate that all the park property that we have in Oak Hill, getting into permits and being able to make smart forms out of those paper forms that we have now, and then getting into tourism and commerce and being able to utilize analysis to understand what we need to be doing in terms of promoting tourism, promoting commerce in our city. And at that point, I'll take any questions from the audience. We have about 5 minutes until the next stage. So is there any questions? Yes.
It's kind of a dumb question, but I guess I'm curious about why it's so expensive. Like, I guess you got to have a trained professional on fairly sophisticated hardware, but like, you know, like it seems like things come down in cost over time. Like that hasn't been. I'm just wondering if you think, you know, what the reason for that is. To be the trend, or do you think costs will?
I would argue the costs have come down some. There have been discussions, and like I said, it wasn't an overnight process to get to where we are. And my explanation would be that our way is not the only way to do it. Our way would be to have these discussions up front with software providers and hardware vendors, and having that understanding ahead of time that, okay, we need to know we're going to budget X amount of dollars to this each year. What are we going to get out of it? We did that year 3 in the process when we could have done it year 1, but we didn't really have the means to do it at the time because we really didn't have a direct line of contact with Esri at the time when I started. The other thing I would suggest too is technology is getting cheaper, and I think from Esri's standpoint and other providers' standpoint, the cost is coming down, especially from acquisition standpoints. You have drone technology out there now that's able to collect data at a much less rate than it used to be from airplanes. You have mobile technology that's continuing to improve, and it's continuing to go down in cost. So it is getting there. One of the eggs we had to crack, though, was getting the software to meet what we needed and to meet our budget. And thankfully, council saw the benefits in that, and they took the leap to do that with that license agreement. That's not for everybody, and I think it's just one of those things that you have to continue to have that conversation with the companies. You have to have that conversation with other municipalities to possibly do a package deal and other things of that nature. And as for the staffing, it depends on what you want to do. Oak Hill really wanted to invest in it, and they took a big investment in hiring me and bringing me into this. And I'll always sing their praises for that, obviously. But other cities that just want to get started into this and aren't really motivated enough to have somebody doing it by themselves, there are tools out there. There are resources for them to get started still and let them do the basics and get up and going, that they don't have to pay that. So there are ways to do it for sure. Were there any other questions? Yes.
Do you see convert the Arcgis program totally in the future? Because I like to write the new for over Texas on the GIS session called Arcgis Pro as far as training.
So the question is switching to Pro compared to desktop. Esri has pretty much made it known that eventually they're going to get rid of desktop, that desktop is being superseded by Pro. And my argument is that's a good way to go, because Pro operates a lot better than desktop does. I don't think it's anywhere in the near term. I think you're 3 to 4 years out still before they will ever consider decommissioning desktop. In terms of training, there is ongoing work to provide training in state and even at the national level to provide training to switch to Pro. Right now, like the training that's going on in Beckley next month, that is still on desktop. But here's the good thing about that course is you get the basics out of that, and it will translate over to learning the Pro software. All right, and with about a minute early, are there any more questions? Yes.
Give us an example of one of your best hits with this, since it's become a tradition. What's the best benefit? Give us the best.
The best benefit that we've had on this, I would have to argue, the one that's gotten us the most notoriety is our council agenda maps, and being able to put those out there monthly to the public and let them disseminate the information. We were pushed into 3 publications by Esri just on that alone, on just a simple story map. The other one I would say is our open data page, which is a full-fledged website that allows the public to access any data that we are generating online, and they can access that data directly, or they can access a wide swath of maps or apps that are also available through that. If I were to pick 2 big ones, it'd be those, because one, it gives us transparency as a local government, and 2, it allows us to put that work out there for people to see in an easy method, compared to emailing somebody a link to a map, emailing a link to the data set, or taking a thumb drive of that data and handing it to you or mailing it to you. It's a lot more easy process to me to take that open data page and access all of that information just right at your fingertips. All right, thank you, everybody. I'll move on to the next part of this. I'm talking for the first hour here, so I'm going to probably run out of breath by 45 minutes here. So the next, Forgive me, I didn't have my agenda up here with me. The next stage of this presentation is a demonstration for Survey 123. And for those who came in late, I do have the desktop computer and the tablet available over here for you to purse through if you'd like. The application is known as Survey 123, and it's basically just a smart form. It's a form that you fill out, and it can be as complex or as simple as you want, and allows you to collect data really quickly. You're not thinking about marking a point as much. You're thinking about putting in information and submitting it. And the one I'm wanting to show is what ended up being a very, very long form, but it was our construction permit application. And I'll just scroll down quickly through it just to show you how much information you have to actually put in here. And you can see that it gets really robust just by having to enter in all this information, addresses, the names, contractor numbers. And then you get down here to the project location. This is the only map you deal with on this application. And you can put in your address, or you can use your tablet or phone and mark a GPS point, and you're good to go. And then there's other information you can put in here, like your street address if you don't know it, or if you want to know your parcel address from the tax parcels, you can put that in there. And then it gets into really complex stuff with regards to, is it a residential or a commercial construction? Because there's two different things that you have to deal with between residential and construction. And then you can check the kind of construction you're doing, and it can be more than one. It can be, are you doing electrical work? Yes or no. And some of these are conditional. So if I click yes on this answer, it automatically gives me another field I have to fill out, like the reconnect number I get from Appalachian Power. If I need to call them and get a reconnect number, I have to put it in here. But if I answer no, that goes away. And this form is built like that all the way through. And even in grouping, like since this is long, if I need to collapse a group, I can do that or open it back up. And I can put in the setbacks, which is the distance from the property line on any side of a building. I can put in floodplain information. If I know it's in a floodplain, I can say no, I can move on. But if I say yes, all of a sudden an entire new section pops up and I have to fill that out and put all that information in. I can collapse that. And then at the bottom, there is a easy calculation here that I can put in the amount of square footage for construction that I put in here. It will automatically generate the zoning permit fee and the construction fee, and it will tabulate that down here. So I don't have to figure up what this is. I don't have to go into the city's code to figure up the percentage and all that. I automatically have a number set in my mind that how much this permit's going to cost me. And then I can put in the site plans. I can upload all these attachments in here and get all the way to the bottom. I see I have to agree to all this information. I can put my signature in here, and I can't draw really well that way. So I can put my signature in, the date I submitted it, and then I'm good to go. But that's all well and good, but how did I get to that point? And what I'm about to show you may scare you. The form itself is developed within Microsoft Excel, and many of us have used it. Many of us are probably terrified to use it. And it can get really boring stuff, as you can see. Like, a lot of this you probably can't even make heads or tails of when you're reading it initially, because it's a lot of scripting and code, and I'm not the best at it, and it took me a while to fill this out. But you see, it's all these fields, and you're just putting in what type of field it is, any constraints to that field, and all that, and you hit save. You go back to this, it will update that form and create that form as it is. But this is just one form. This is just one way that we're doing it. Another form that we did was we did a walking trail naming form. So we had a walking trail that was just built in Oak Hill, and we polled the public to ask them, what do you think the name of the park should be? Or what you think the name of the trail should be? And we had 60 responses. We ended up having 60 responses, and the names that people submitted into that were generated into a word cloud. And that word cloud allowed us to basically see what the public wanted the name to be. And sure enough, council saw the four biggest responses was Harlem Heights Harlem Heights Loop Trail. And that's what they ended up naming it because of that survey. They got the public input and they responded to that public input. And at this point, I did a quick walkthrough of all this. I'll answer any questions if anybody has any about this software and other applications they would like to see from this, at least.
Can you generate different fields with this system? Type of thing, like you want to do a CVO check?
Yeah.
Inspection field?
Yeah, you can do any kinds of fields. I'll just show the options here. You can make it a drop-down list. You can make it something somebody just types in a number and they can't type in anything else. You can make it just a text field. You can make it a geolocation field, which just it gives you a point on a map. You can make it date, time. You can make it a calendar that drops down and fill it in. Just to bounce down to some that make sense here. There is one that you can scan a barcode and get the barcode information into. I have not used that. Obviously, I don't have barcodes available to me. But like if you had a QR code or something on a light pole, you could scan it. It would automatically put it into that survey for you, and you would submit that information in, and you would have that ready a long time.
Related to this, is it a self-searching system? I mean, can you search different permit types?
Yeah, so this is just the submission part of it. You have two different ways of looking at this data. One is through Survey 123's data viewer, and that one will give you the option to look at words like word clouds. You can see the larger the response or the greater response, the larger the word is in the word cloud. Or you have the option to pull the data into your own mapping or your own analysis, and you can parse through it that way. So there's multiple ways to do it. This all goes to an online GIS database, and what that ends up doing is you have that data readily available to do whatever you want with it. It doesn't have to be just looking at this survey. It can be for other uses as well. Were there any other questions? There are a couple of ways to see this, and I'll try to pull this up really quick. If it'll cooperate with me. It'll eventually load here. I'll show you what the data viewer looks like from Survey 123. Or maybe not. There we go. There we go. And just as a quick cover, if you have access to ArcGIS online, for an organization, we have access to a wide breadth of these tools here, and they're all on a drop-down menu. So we use several of these on a day-to-day basis. So let me go to the walking trail survey just to show you what the viewer looks like. So you see right away, like this is a word cloud for just the names of the participants, and a lot of people just filled in anonymous. I can scroll down here and show you 20 people filled out anonymous, and we ended up having, scroll down here. We ended up having 61 total, but 3 people did not fill it out. For the most part, are you an Oak Hill resident? Scrolling on down, and most of the people said yes, but we did have some people who were not residents fill out this form. 44 to 17, actually. So you see a graphical display, and then you see the actual data below to see the responses. And so what do you think should be the name of the walking trail? And right away, you see 4 names pop out big on the screen: Harlem Heights Loop Trail. And Harlem and Trail ended up being the 2 greatest ones. So council took the top 4 answers and made that the name of the trail, Harlem Heights Loop Trail. But you can see all the answers down here. If there was only one response, it got a tiny position in the word cloud. But if it got 30 responses, it got a huge word in the word cloud. So that's one way of disseminating. If I write a sentence in a report and 20 other people write a sentence, the words that are most prominent in those sentences will get put into this word cloud, and you'll see if each person is writing about the same thing over and over again. And maybe that's a problem that you need to address, or maybe that's something you need to think about in terms of an ordinance or what have you. I mean, this survey can be used for any realm within local government. I mean, it can be used for code enforcement. It can be used for planning and zoning, for public input. Council, if there's a certain item that they would like to poll the public for, this is one that we can put together really quickly, have it out to the public, and look at these results in a month and be able to disseminate, okay, maybe we do need to name this trail Harlem Heights Loop Trail, since that's the top 4 answers. Or maybe we need to look at renaming this street Bob Street if we wanted to, because it had the most prominent name. Move that back up. So were there any questions related to survey 1, 2, 3? Yes.
Can you sort that out and take more residents, take 100% of their answers out?
Yes, you can filter out, and I'll just click filter here, and I'll filter by, I have to do this. Are you an Oak Hill resident? And then I can put in yes, and add that in there. Oh, there we go. Oh, whoops. Close that out there and close that out. So it filtered out. It's given us 44 out of 61 total responses. And I can go back down through here and see, okay, it ended up being the same. So it didn't matter. But if we're talking about filtering between residents in one part of the community and residents in another part of the community, like if it's a specific to a street, maybe we want to know, do you live on this street or not? And we can disseminate, okay, listen, you don't live on that street. You shouldn't have an input on naming it. It should be more specific to the people that live there. And you can filter that out that way. But yeah, it's very easy. I mean, it's a few clicks and you're able to pull out the data that you need from it. Any more questions?
Is there any way that you can have information between different agencies, or would everybody have to be set up on the same?
To see the data real time, you probably have to be on the same system, but there are ways to share data between organizations. You can like share your data publicly or provide them the link to that data set, and they can have it in their own maps and they will get access to it real time that way. The other possible way of doing it is to make a copy of that data and put it into offsite disk or something like that, and you can provide that data to the agency that you're needing to. Now, they don't see it real time, but that's still giving them the data that they're looking for. Were there any more questions? Okay, I'll move on to the next stage here. And the second part of this demonstration was to talk about our open data website. Some of you may have heard of it. Some of you might be seeing this for the first time. But this is one of the solutions that we have through our contract with Esri that gives us access to basically develop our own website that is centric to providing all the data that we're generating to the public. And this is known as Oak Hill GIS, the Pride of the Plateaus open data site. And typically a picture will load behind there, and I'm sure it's still loading. But right away, some of the featured web applications. So these are some of the quick hit applications that we have out there. The first one was Where Do I Vote? That was huge for the recent election. It Takes a Village. The presentation I just did, I have it in story map form on this website. So if you would like to read more on Oak Hill GIS, this is a great application to look through. Citizen Problem Reporter. If you're a resident and you want to submit a report directly to the city, you have access to open this application directly from this page. And then another high demand application is our zoning map and being able to view our zoning map. And you can open that up here as well. And the great thing about that is it's all online. So if we do have a rezoning that's approved, it will get changed automatically in the map and you will see it real time. So there's no waiting for another publication of this map. It's automatically changed as we edit it. So you will see the live data. You will see the real time version of the zoning map as you're going. And then some of the pages I have already put on open data. One that's dedicated to Needles Eye Park, since we have a lot of maps and apps out there dedicated just to Needles Eye. I figured we needed to have a page directly for it. Another is tourism. The big feature on that page right now is the Bridge Day viewer that we had for the most recent Bridge Day event back in October. That was a pretty big hit according to participants of the event. Then I have one just for today's event, GIS Day. So if you want to see more about it, definitely go there. I'll have some more information following up with that. We have a page dedicated to the recent PCB testing that's taken place in Minden. So if you're following that event right now, following the projects taking place there, we are keeping a data set of all of the agencies that are providing testing on this. That's available there as well. And then the forms and surveys, we are putting any surveys out to the public on there, but also any forms that we make digital on here, those will be available on there as well. And just to see, we have some social media links as well, so you can look through some of the things we have put out there. And then the Peace Day Resistance, our council agenda story maps. So if you want to know what's coming up on the next council meeting, or in this case, if you want to see what just happened at the council meeting yesterday, we have the story map up here and it's embedded. You can explore it just as you would if you had access to the map itself. And you can go through all these sections and see what's going on a particular item. You can open up the links to the documents that deal with each particular item. So if you want to read this letter, you can open it up. If you want to look at a scan of citations, you can open that up. If you want to see the resolution that council considered, you can open that up. And it doesn't matter if you're an official or a member of the general public, you have access to view these items. And another one, like say, there's a rezoning taking place. Well, one of the big things we have is a zoning map. If you want to read that, you can try to go find it in another place. You can scroll back to the top of the page, or within this story map, you can open up the zoning map directly within that story map to view all this information. And you can see exactly where this instance is, or where this item is taking place. You can see the information underlying for that issue, and you become a more informed general public. You can become a more informed council member. And overall, we'll be making smarter decisions by seeing all this information in real time. And then down at the bottom here, you can also see the categories of our data. You can view all of the data that we have right now available through our open data page. You can break it down into citizen engagement. You can break it down into planning and zoning, stormwater. You can look at our story maps. You can see previous council agenda story maps. If you wanted to see a historical record of what's going on, you have access to that. Anything recreation related, tourism related, you can look at the data related to it through that through those categories as well. So I'll scroll back up to the top here. Are there any questions, anything anybody would like to see from this page? Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to take a moment to take a breather. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Next up, we have Megan Click from Mount West Community and Technical College, and she'll be talking about her work with local governments in the educational sector. Okay, everybody, we'll get back and started here. It's 1 o'clock and or 2 o'clock now, and it's time for our next presentation. Yes. Probably gonna have to. Coming up next is Megan Click from Mount West Community and Technical College, and let's welcome her for her presentation.
Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to GIS Day. This is actually the 19th year of GIS Day. It started in 1999 in Redlands, California. And finally made its way to West Virginia. Only took a few years. So I'm here to talk to you about GIS and government use, and then how higher education fits in with all of this. Because in order to train people in GIS, you actually need to have the programs available and access to the education. So I am, like I said, I'm Megan Click. I'm the assistant professor and program coordinator for the Geospatial Science and Technology program and the Drone Technology program at Mount West Community College in Huntington, West Virginia. I just got a grant in June from the West Virginia system to start the Drone Technology program as an offshoot of my geospatial program. My geospatial program has actually been in existence for 13 years, and it is still the only 2-year geospatial program available in West Virginia. Here we are again, Oak Hill. So I was going to talk to you about my program and then some collaborations that we're currently working on with smaller municipalities in around the Huntington area. And then what we have been talking about as far as workforce development to prepare people within the smaller cities to be able to use the GIS system. So like I said before, this is the 13th year of my geospatial program and the first year of my drone program. The geospatial program teaches GIS foundations. So we teach ArcMap, ArcCatalog. We're moving into ArcPro and WebGIS. I also have a Python programming class that I teach, and then digital cartography. All of the students in the 2-year AAS degree have to take a internship, a 3-credit-hour internship at the end before they graduate. One of the obstacles that I've had so far is finding internships for my students to go into. There aren't a lot in the Huntington area, and the ones that there are, I'm also competing with Marshall's Geography Department and other areas to get their students in internships. Local government is a perfect place to put interns. However, the smaller local municipalities in the area who would like to use GIS aren't currently, because they just don't have people there who know how to use it, and they haven't gotten into the conversation with acquiring the software. So actually within the last week, 2 weeks, I started talking to officials at the city of Milton. It just so happens that their planning and development director started working at Mount West once he left Milton, and I'm from Milton. And Milton has invested in some very nice drone technology. They have about a $20,000 DJI Matrix drone that they use in addition to a DJI Phantom. So when I started talking, and it's a large industrial surveying drone, it's a monster. And when I started talking to him, I said, well, what are they doing with the imagery from the drone? Because really the purpose of flying them, especially with the geospatial aspect, is remote sensing. You're acquiring land features with the drone, getting the imagery. You can put them in the software, process it, and it gives you ortho-rectified maps. You can make digital surface models, digital terrain models. It'll give you a number of 3D mesh outputs just from the software that we use for these. And so he said, no, they're actually not doing anything with it, but they've been talking about GIS and they're really interested in it. So luckily it was just a phone call and a setup of a meeting that we started talking to them and got them in touch with Daniel Peters, who is the Esri government rep in Charlotte. And so we now have them on track to talking about acquiring the license and everything else, because I realized that I need to get GIS use into the smaller governments in order to first create internships for my students to work into, and hopefully build a workforce or a need for my students. Right now, I not only have a problem recruiting students because nobody knows what GIS is, I also have a problem finding jobs in the area. The students in the 2-year programs don't want to leave the area that they're in. That's why they go to the schools too. And so I'm trying my best to spur job growth in the GIS area. This has had a positive development because after I talked to Milton, they got into the conversation with Chris Childs, who's actually the director of the Region 2 team development. I met with him and the people from Milton and Barbersville actually last Thursday. So since I wrote the description of this talk, everything's kind of changed anyway. Things are always evolving. So since we met with them and we had the discussion, we're now looking into a regional aspect of it, to also do something with Sarita and Canova, and then out into the other hinterlands of what would be Region 2. During our conversation though, it was also discussed that the people who are currently working in the local governments don't have the time to actually come to Mount West and take one of my courses. If we want to get it in there, we need to train the people who already work there how to use it as well. So we have Rhonda Scragg is our Director of Workforce Development at Mount West. So she is now involved and we're trying to develop courses or a program where I would actually go to municipalities and offer professional development courses in the basics of GIS. Train the people who want to get in on the regional license and everything else, actually how to use it within their city. And then they will be more able to see the usefulness of it, hopefully find the money to create a full-time position, and then for my students will have jobs. This is part of my DBS plan over 5 or 10 years. Hopefully we'll see if it works out. But that is what I have going on right now. Just trying to get some jobs and experience for my students and trying to increase GIS jobs in West Virginia. As far as recruitment into my program, I still have low numbers just because when students come to Mount West for a tour and I talk to them, drones help a lot now because they have something to look at and it's a nice, cute thing. But with GIS, it's the first time they've ever heard about it. So when students walk onto a community college campus and I'm talking to them about GIS, the first thing that goes through their head is, if that was a viable field of study, I would have heard about it before now. So thank you for your time, but I'm going to go over here. So I'm trying to turn that around too. The West Virginia Department of Education is developing GIS and UAS curriculum for high school students in West Virginia. Hopefully within the next 5 years, high school students will be taking those classes. And so GIS is going to continue to grow. As far as the workforce development, we're developing all of it. So this is all being created and evolving. But feel free to contact me at any point if any of you are looking into using GIS or would like further GIS training. I know the WVAGP also offers training, not trying to step on anybody's toes or anything like that, but you know, education's education anyway, you get it. And so there we go. Happy GIS Day, everybody. Today, I'm a geographer, and so this is my day. Like for a mathematician, Pi Day is their day. So I shouldn't start crying. I'm just so happy. So does anybody have any questions? I have my business cards over here on the table. If anybody would like to contact me, or do you have any questions at all about my program or anything that we're doing? Yeah.
Does the website for your teachers have a setup that has all the information about your program?
That is a very good question because I actually had to make a phone call to my dean on the way down here. Because I said, can you guys get something on the Mount West website that talks about my burn technology program? We got $220,000 in funding, guys. We need to let people know it's there. So it's in development. Did you have a question?
A lot of communities across the state are looking for a regional GIS
Mm-hmm.
arrangement. And you know, I think most of them want to meet desktop type licensing or capabilities. But if there's a community's got together, would you be able to do this some sort of maybe half a day or day training on who the database
Oh.
data collector side is that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Would you be willing to travel someplace over Mount West?
Oh, Yeah, no problem. No, that's no problem at all. I had my grant actually that I'm working under right now has professional development for outside entities built into it. I'm actually being paid for it.
Are you set up to where you can do that video?
I am. Also, what I also have is I have a mobile geospatial lab that we had outfitted with my previous grant. And it is actually a computer lab on wheels. And so the whole back of it is built to where we can put my laptops up. I have the software in there. I can actually do classes from there. Or just drive around to advertise the program and come to your city and train you. I need to pull up a map that shows the regions. Well, I lived in Princeton for the last year, actually, so I'm rather familiar with this area. Okay. I did for a year, and then I moved back to Huntington. I've had a crazy year. No, it is absolutely gorgeous.
Far ahead of the curve is West Virginia in terms of behind the curve, way behind average nationwide.
It's way behind. We just as of last year got a direct contact with our own software provider, and with that as well is the resources available to communities. Daniel Peters, the gentleman she mentioned, he's our account manager as well, and he has pretty much done a tour across the state. He's been pretty much the direct contact for John and Jason in their regions to set up this regional agreement to get people involved with it. They've gotten that footwork part done, and now the next part is getting these communities informed on, okay, you have access to this now, here's what you need to know how to use it, and providing it to them. That's the next stage of this. But in terms of other states, I'm not going to toot my own horn here. Oak Hill, they've said themselves is ahead of the curve, but statewide, Fairmont doesn't have it. Charleston has it. Huntington has it. Bluefield sort of has it, but nobody's gotten up and going with it really, except for a handful of communities. So it's still very much a work in progress to get everybody caught up nationwide.
And now Marvin is being modest too, because I've had many conversations with Daniel where Daniel says Oak Hill, at Esri conferences, Oak Hill, as far as their GIS program and what Marvin has done here, is mentioned alongside of Atlanta and Miami and Charlotte and all the larger cities in this area.
Still haven't seen the videos. So.
West Virginia, but as far as rural America, yeah, we're stepping ahead of the rest of the country, just like West Virginia, part of the world. They focus on urban. West Virginia's the first time we've really stepped into the world. That's fine.
Well, and talking with some of the higher ups at Esri, I didn't speak with a couple while in San Diego. One of the things that I got from a couple of them out there is what they're trying to crack in West Virginia is what they're trying to crack nationwide. They're trying to just find out the best way to get this to rural communities. And through West Virginia, they're trying to figure that out. And that's why they've been willing to work with us and try to figure out what the price point is on their end and what works for us, what works for the region, what works for the smaller communities. And like I said, the biggest benefit we've had in the past year is that we've had that line of communication open. And John's had that line of communication open. He's been able to get in their ears and tell them what we need, what we don't need, what's not necessary, what is necessary, and in terms of understanding how to develop all of this. it's been huge. If we hadn't had all that, we'd still be talking about, well, you know, it'd be great to do this. And we're finally past that stage, I think.
And I think Daniel's been a really big help too, because the way it was explained to me, West Virginia, the area of West Virginia as a whole, was under the Philadelphia office at Esri for a long time, and their reps really weren't involved down here. And so since it's moved to Charlotte and it's been given to Daniel, I want to call him Peter, Daniel. Yeah, I know. He's done a fantastic job. And I met him here back in the spring when you had the thing too. And he's very responsive, very helpful. We've had 2 conference calls with him in the last 2 weeks with Milton and Bourboursville and Region 2 and everything. Yes. And this is what I was actually just talking about to chat about. One of the other issues I have right now is the fact that we're in the only 2-year college and the 2-year program. I really need to duplicate my program and have it installed in another 2 years. Like I have an articulation agreement with Marshall University and the because New River doesn't have the program that I do. And I've talked to my dean about this because it really seems like the way to make it happen is for me to write the technical program development grant through the West Virginia CTC system, ask for $220,000 of funding for 3 years, and then get the president of New River or whoever to sign off on it and say, yes, we want this program, and then find the faculty in there, and then I act as like a coordinator to just keep it in line with it. And I'd really like to install this across the state because I'm not benefiting anybody in Southern West Virginia by doing it. I can, but not as much as if I have a counterpart in Southern West Virginia or in Eastern Kansas. Or, you know, we have WVU, which is an excellent resource in the north, but from there down, there isn't. Each county is different. Each county has a different view. In Cabell County, they didn't want to put it in their CTE system. And then I talked to a teacher at Wayne County this morning at Marshall GIS Day who said that they wanted to put it in their CTE system. And it's one of those things that it's a county by county decision. I teach dual credit classes in the high schools. The only problem with the dual credit classes is I have to find a faculty member in the high schools willing to teach the class. If they're willing to teach it, their students just get 3 credit hours from Mount West, college credit for passing that course in high school. But it's a problem talking to people and getting it taken care of. But I've only been in this position since 2015, so it's only been 3 years. So hopefully within the next 3 to 5 years, things will be growing even more. I really think the best thing to do, though, would be to try to get more education in order to help in the state. Yes, it's an AAS degree. Yes. Sorry. Okay. Testing.
Okay, yeah, it's working. Apologies to everybody that was watching. The microphone was not working.
Oh. Well, that might be a good thing for me then. Does anybody have any other questions about anything? For anybody who might be in the Huntington area that may be interested, I have an adjunct who's teaching a drones in sport class this spring. They're actually going to be building racing drones and learning how to fly them. It's an evening class, so everybody can participate. But I'm trying with the drone program, I'm trying to cover every aspect of drone technology that exists, and there are many, many areas of it. For kids that have grown up playing video games, it may take that one class, and next thing you know, they're in the drone racing league making $100,000 for winning a race, and they don't have to worry about education anymore. They just get to fly drones. You know, it could go that way very easily. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for having me. I have my business cards over here on the table. for anybody that would like to take one. I have to pull a Joe Manchin. I've got to head out the door the minute I get done talking. I've been to some conferences where he has been. I'm like, novel. But thank you so much, and contact me if you ever have any questions or need anything. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to make sure this microphone's picking up now. It appears to be on my screen. Next up, we have Mr. Chad Thompson. And he's going to be talking about the Watershed Resource Registry. Okay, everybody can hear now, so I'm going to back out of there. You might have to hold the microphone because it was not picking up. Sadly, for all of you that did not hear Megan Click's presentation, yeah, it was really good. I do apologize for any audio difficulties, and am keeping an eye on it now. And okay, I'm gonna hand it off to Chad.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for hosting today. I really enjoyed it. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation today. Instead, since I would like to use a online application, we are actually going to go through the online application in a usable method. So I'm here today to talk about the Watershed Resources Registry. This is a new tool that has been launched in several of the states across the EPA region for which we would be associated. So it's being launched in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, Delaware, Virginia, and West Virginia. And the Watershed Resource Registry is an interactive mapping tool that is used to prioritize the preservation and restoration efforts across the state. So when we're looking at things, a lot of times we think on a small scale in terms of a street when we're looking at it from the city perspective, but then we also need to start thinking sometimes on the larger scale. This tool is used to help prioritize between one site and another site for restoration and preservation. But it is also used as a major repository for GIS data that is usually harder to find or harder to access throughout the state of West Virginia. So what we did was we went together and created the Watershed Resource Registry as a place just to keep as much data together as possible. And in each one of the states, let me go to our state page. It looks like the internet's going to be a little slow, so this might be interesting to go live. For the state of West Virginia, started back in 2016, the Corps of Engineers and the EPA and the Department of Environmental Protection got together and said, we would like to have a place for GIS data so that we all have the same type of data. I joined up with this team last year, and one of the first things that we came across was something simple like, where are trout in West Virginia? Somebody asked that generic question. The Corps of Engineers provided us with a map, had their trout streams on it. The DNR provided a map and it had their trout streams, and the DEP had their trout streams. And when we looked at them, none of them matched. Nobody used the same data to create the same maps. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to have one location so that the general public wasn't so confused about this. What is the most accurate information that the general public would want to have related to the state? And this can be the names of a stream. This can be the name of a mountain. The local names don't necessarily mean as much if you can't communicate outside of that. So, well, that's Briars Hill. How long has it been Briars Hill? Don't know. But whenever you look at a map, it might not say that. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to get the most accurate maps throughout the state of West Virginia, all in one spot. And that's part of what the registry does. So down here on the bottom, my contact information is in the West Virginia section. And since my last name's Thompson, I'm all the way down at the bottom. So feel free to contact me. Huh? I did beat Steve. But these are some of the different organizations that have worked together to help create the Watershed Resource Registry. So they've signed off that they like these particular maps. They like that the way it's presented. It might not necessarily be the one that they use for all of their purposes. However, it is something that they think that the general public could benefit from. So with all of that, I'd like to just go ahead and step into what is the Watershed Resource Registry by bringing up a map. And our map here, of course, is of the state itself. When you open the Watershed Resource Registry, it gives you a disclaimer that this information is information. It is not a finalized site visit. We're looking at the state on a big scale. We're not necessarily looking on a street scale all the time. So it's beneficial for planning and development. But if you're looking and say, oh, well, you know, my house isn't listed in this particular area, so it doesn't apply. It may apply, but on the big statewide level, it just may not be included. So we want to look at things in remembrance that a map is no substitute for a site visit. You can have as many maps as you want, and then you show up at the site and you realize, oh, by the way, the creek is flooded right now and we can't do a project today. So things like that are good to know and to think about. One of the important aspects of the Watershed Resource Registry that I like the most are here in our layers list. So we're all familiar with Arcgis, and this is pretty much a GIS interface. It is easy to use. It's click and point and drag and drop type thing. So it's very easy to use, but I'm going to go through here to a layers list and just show you some key points. And that's what I wanted to do today. So this is some restoration, preservation of different types of things in our area. So we are here. We'll go right to Oak Hill for today. 2 words, right? Yep. Oak Hill, West Virginia.
Not Calhoun.
Okay, looking at the individual city, wetland restoration or wetland, let's go preservation first. When I click on this section of the model, it is going to show us where current wetlands are listed on the state level. So you might have a wetland in your backyard that's your personal wetland. It might not be protected as the waters of the United States. However, these wetlands that you see on this particular map are wetlands that are recognized by the state as wetlands. It's not necessarily something next to the street or next to the railroad tracks, but it's something that the state recognizes as a wetland. We can zoom in to these areas, and this is areas that need preservation. So this is the preservation model. If we open this up, should just give me a drop-down menu, but it's not. If we open up these models, you see that they're in different colors. So if anybody's been to the National Wetlands Inventory, you see that they're not listed in colors like this. These colors, however, are listed by what areas need the most restoration or the most preservation. So if a color is darker, like as in this map, we have here in the center of this, we have a dark area. That is an area that needs the most preservation. That can mean that it is a wetland that has been identified as struggling, and we need to do something to make sure that it survives. But the areas that have the lighter colors are already either pristine or they are an area that we don't need to do any work towards. We just keep it like it is. However, if we look at this other one, let's zoom out and look at wetland restoration. Now we're going to look and see what areas within our little city or county area could potentially become a wetland. So if we've decided that we've gone through and accidentally destroyed a wetland, the Corps of Engineers is not going to be happy about that. They're going to say you need to fix that. You need to mitigate for that. So we've gone through and we figured out what areas within the state could potentially become wetlands. So the wetland restoration model is areas that are not currently wetlands, but could become wetlands or have historically been wetlands. So it's something that the average everyday planner might not be thinking about on a daily basis. But if now we're going to put in a new industrial park, this might be important, because a wetland could be an area that's going to soak up a lot of water from the stormwater perspective. So it would map and show the location of that. Okay. Then we've got things like restoration of riparian and preservation of riparian. A riparian zone is the buffers around a stream. So for restoration, if we're looking at this map, you see that we have a lot of different yellows all across the state and across the county. The darker the yellow, the more an area needs trees. It needs buffers of some sort next to the stream to control flooding, to control stormwater. And so we went through and we used some satellite imagery analysis and figured out what needs to be done in those areas. So let's just come right here and zoom in. I'm going to change the background a little bit into aerial imagery. Now, when we turn off the restoration model, we can see that this area surrounding the stream has some vegetation. When we turn on the restoration, we can see what areas might need trees planted. So if you're looking on a large scale and you say, well, we're going to be putting in, we've got this, Mineral County, for example, always has, all of their schools are surrounded by lots and lots of acres of open land. Most of it was on an old farm or an old abandoned piece of property. We could use this model to say, well, if the stream runs next to it, where could we potentially plant trees, to have the most impact? And that's what part of this is being used for, is where can your project in terms of restoration or preservation have the most impact? And the darker the colors, the more impact can be done in those areas. But let's take and use a everyday use that's the wetland or the Watershed Resource Registry is currently being used for. So I'm going to come out here, if it'll let me, and we're going to zoom in back into an area up north in my area of the state. Don't worry, we're not going to be in Cumberland. It's just really close. If anybody has ever been to Mineral County, and you go to the top, it is sort of like an outskirts of Cumberland in this area. So you've got the small towns of Ridgely and Carpendale that have about 1,000 people living in each town. So a very small community, but these small communities wanted to bring in some outside influence in terms of tourism dollars. So they have, in Cumberland is the base of the Allegheny Trail, and it is also the top of the the canal that flows from Cumberland all the way down the Potomac River. So there are two major trails in that area that West Virginia doesn't benefit a lot from because they're on the wrong side of the river. However, Ridgely and Carpendale have developed because of Cumberland being developed. And so one thing that Ridgely and Carpendale have is they have old railroad lines that are no longer being used. So what they did is they said that they wanted to take and create a bicycling, hiking trail system through their parts of the towns using the old abandoned railroad system. And they went a few years ago, and there's an old railroad tunnel that runs right through the center of the mountain, and they created the Carpendale Rail Tunnel system. And that flows right here. You can see the line as it goes right through the center of the mountain. And on this map, which can this be dropped down?
The green arrow on the side.
This one?
No,
oh, that'll work. This might show us a little bit better. This is the actual town's mapping system of what they're, the blue line here is what currently exists as a trail. It goes from the center of their town through the tunnel and pops up over here on the C&O Canal. There are an estimated 10,000 people a year drive through this tunnel from Maryland as they're going down the C&O. There's a tunnel. They drive through it. They get to the other side. There's a sign that says, "Welcome to West Virginia." They turn around, they drive back. So they spent money trying to maintain this trail through the center of the tunnel, but now they're not getting any funding from that. They have a nice partial trail system, but as soon as they get to the other side, it just ends. So they said, how can we make this a better option? So these are some different proposed routes that they're thinking about expanding the trail system to make it into a loop going all the way back into Cumberland again. And using the town of Ridgely and the town of Carpendale, this is what they would like to see. So what we did is we took their maps and we put them into our system, and I just made it all on one color so it was easier to see. And we said, if you decide to build this trail system on the existing railroad trails, what kind of problems are you going to come across? I work with stormwater mostly in my job. So I said, from a stormwater perspective, what are some areas that are going to be influenced by tremendous amount of water, by flooding, things that you don't currently account for in terms of your budgeting every year. But if you put this trail system in, people aren't going to walk the trail if it's always flooded. So you're going to have to maintain that. So we went through and used the WRR and used where we could predict where wetlands could potentially be formed. And we said those are areas that are going to be nice and wet. So we come on here and let's turn on the wetland restoration model. And as you can see, our little trail system is going to have some areas right here along this particular path that could potentially become a wetland again. If that becomes a wetland after they put the trail system in, it's going to be a constant source of upkeep that they don't necessarily have the funding to deal with right now. However, if they come right down here on this path, there's nothing there currently that would cause them additional problems. So this altogether is almost 17 acres that could potentially become a wetland in the future. They don't necessarily want to deal with that right now. So if they make the path a little bit longer, it'll cost more money to build a longer path for the city. However, it's going to be less maintenance in the future. So they're using this as a way to predict where they might have that type of problem. But they also have to look at the towns themselves and figure out some different layers that they can turn on to give them information about their town and some things of that nature. One of those would be the hydrology of the town. So as this layer comes up, it'll take it a minute. It will show where the current and existing streams are, how they are marked, and where they have been historically. So if let's say a coal mine went in and they rerouted the stream, it'll show the original paths and it'll show the new paths. And I'm just letting it load, but it looks like it may not load because when the internet's a little slow, sometimes it just will take it a few minutes. But let me go ahead and talk about some of the other layers that we have. We have the wetlands layer from the National Wetlands Inventory. One thing that some towns don't really realize is that you cannot just dispose of a wetland. You can't just fill in a wetland if it is part of the National Wetlands Inventory. I'm finding out that there's a lot of towns that don't know that. If it's a protected wetland, you can't just destroy it. So when we show people this and say, this is an online source, if you're going to go look at a site, let's say that you're doing part of your zoning rules and you say, we want to zone this whole area for commercial, and we look and you've got 15 wetlands in that area, you might want to reconsider zoning that for commercial because you can't just destroy the wetlands. If you destroy a wetland, you have to mitigate, and that's very expensive. The hydrology layer is not going to show up. It's just being too slow. Hydrology is one layer. An active river area, this is going to show not only the normal path of the stream, however, it's also going to show when you get extended periods of rain, where can this go? So an area that might be listed currently as just a nice big farmer's field, whenever you look at it again, you say, well, after a rain event, it might turn into an island. The active river layer will actually show that as well, and it shows historically where the water layers have gone. Let's see if we can get that one to turn on. There we go. So this particular one is working. This area here on our map is an area that is a bunch of ups and downs. It's a sediment deposition in the river. So whenever you go there and you look at it, you're like, oh, this kind of makes sense that this area during a flooding event is going to have lots of areas where the water is currently sitting. So now it's easy for local government officials to see some of this information that it might be listed somewhere on a map or in a flash drive. Now it is in a visual representation for anybody to see. Flood hazard zones. The flood hazard zones in the state of West Virginia are currently being updated. So if your area is not currently in a flood zone, but you flooded the past 2 years, you may become part of the next update in the flood zone. And we're using this to show people where the current flood zone needs are. Watershed assessment data. If you have a question about your particular stream, we can go in and pull up your stream and see what type of information has been retrieved from that stream in terms of its quality. Usually we can.
There's a chance it might be just shown in, it'll only show in the legend instead of letting you click on the layer.
There's a chance, yeah. Here's some dots. If we sit here long enough, the internet will populate a drop-down box that gives you the information about that dot. But as we can see, the internet is being very slow today and being stubborn for us, because that's what happens when you try to show something live. The internet goes slow. So when you click on these dots, you can find out that is the exact site that the Department of Environmental Protection does the assessments for your stream. Now, that is the normal scheduled assessment. If something happens and somebody says, hey, we've got a big fish kill, we will come out and do water assessment there. That wouldn't be included in this. This is just the routine assessments so that we can monitor tracking over time. And so those dots are there. And this one has several dots, so you can tell it's been several years that this particular site has been tested. And they're not all directly on the stream. That's because sometimes whenever the data is collected, it's not collected with pinpoint accuracy in terms of GPS. They say, hey, we were at this particular bridge whenever we got the data. And the person who put it in the computer might have it a little bit around that general area, but you get an idea of where the data was collected. Another thing that's important whenever you're doing planning is figuring out, is your area inside of a karst area? Karst is, it's an area that is especially designated with geography because a lot of times it contains caves. It contains underground water aquifers that is a unique geography. So I'm not a karst expert. However, I do know that whenever you are in these particular areas that are designated in blue as karst, then you need to take special considerations when you're dealing with stormwater and whenever you're dealing with wastewater, because it can't just penetrate into the ground the same way. If you want to know the geography as listed by the National Geography layers, that's available here as well. And some things you have to zoom in to see because it's a lot of data, so it won't populate until you get in closer. And the last thing I want to show on here, since this is just a basic general demo, we have some parcel data for, I believe it is 90% of the state has updated their parcel data online, and it is here. So if you're looking at a particular project site, you can see that the information is available here, and it has information that is directly from the state database. We decided with the Watershed Resource Registry, since the general public uses this, that we just pulled people's names off. We don't want somebody from a watershed association or from an activist group saying, oh, that pipeline is going to go through so-and-so's backyard. Let's go tell them about it. Even though that information is readily available and all of the parcel data is easily found online, we just didn't really want to add another harassment to the individuals who own the land. We figured that was an easy thing for them. And again, if we wait, it will pop it up. It will pop up the information about that site. And it gives the map coordinates and things of that nature. So this is just a general, easy to use public interface that has a bunch of state information. It is not something that is accurate to the inch lines. However, it is something that we figured that the state planning people and anyone that is planning a project could potentially use it to prioritize over one site to another. Recently, we've been working with a group from the DC area who would like to expand into the lower Martinsburg area. And they said, we've got 2 sites, we've got 70 acres that we would like to buy. These are our 2 sites. Which one is going to require more work on us to do stormwater renovations? So if they could build it on both sites, it's cost the same to build it, but then one area is inside of an MS4 and it has higher regulations, then they're going to have to mitigate for that. Also, if it is inside of a karst environment, are they going to be able to keep their settling tanks underground, or are they going to need to put something above ground to deal with the karst? So the different rules and regulations apply to the different areas of the state. And this is just an easy way to see, turn on as many layers as you want, have them all laid up and say, here's our 2 sites. And we have one more thing that we like about this, is that you can get location details for anything. Now that I have these sites up, if I want to know all the information from all of those maps about this particular piece of parcel, I can either highlight the polygon and click report, and it will give me a PDF that says inside of that area, you have 4 acres of wetland. You have 2 acres that are inside of an MS4. You have 4 acres that can be used with the sewer service district. You have 6 acres, all 6 acres are accessible to the public water system. And if you look at another site and it says, oh, by the way, you have water, but you don't have sewer, it's going to help to prioritize projects like that as well. So if anybody has any questions about this, I will take them now. And usually this talk is about 3.5 hours. So I had to condense it down quite a bit. The sewer system map is taken directly from the DEP sewer layer. So as the individual sewer entities give us their updated thing that says we've expanded the sewer line this far. So every time they do an expansion project, the DEP finds out where those expansion, and it all goes into one map, and that's where this information comes from. So, and every link that is in the Watershed Resource Registry is automatically updated when the host network updates. So if the Division of Highways is the one that has the highway sections of the map, and they update today at noon, this will be updated today at noon as soon as it can pull it. If they don't update for 6 months, then it'll stay the exact same data because we pull it from there every time the tool opens. It is not something that's static. So if you have it today and you say in 6 months you go back to look and the data is different, that's because the host has changed the data. One thing that we are working on, and I'll go ahead and allude to this, within the next 6 months, the Watershed Resource Registry, not only is it still going to remain available to the general public, there will be, you will be able to apply for a login. So if you are a city group that is using this, or you're a watershed association, or you're a regional planner, and you are using any information from this, you can save your data through a login, and you can upload information. So if, what region are you in, 2 or 3?
For DEP 3, DEP region 3.
Okay, so you can upload your data or a connection to it, to the Watershed Resource Registry. And as you update your data, it'll update there, but only the people you say can have access to it will have access to the links. So it kind of restricts it, but it'll allow it that way. And if you say, well, the DEP has this, but we're showing this, you can send that link to the DEP and say, here, this is a discrepancy. Can you fix it? And we can update it as it goes.
So will they be able to access, like where our organization, we have our sewer network online, we have a hosted layer. Would they be able to access that themselves from DEP?
No. The only way is if you was to share a
So we have
link to
share
it.
then. Okay.
Correct. So it's the access that will be granted through the logins. It doesn't actually save any of the data to the system itself. It just saves the links to your system. So
Okay.
if your system goes down, this goes down. Earlier today, the National Wetlands Inventory was down. Again, it goes down about once a day. I don't know why, but it was down earlier. And whenever you have the pop-up screen that says, remember, this isn't as good as the actual site visit, it will tell you at the same time, these layers are not accessible right now. So if you're planning on looking at the wetlands, it'll tell you right off it's not available.
This is available to the public right now.
This is general public. Anybody can use it, and it's going to remain available to the general public. But once the usernames are created, you can have your links and your stuff shared, because as soon as I press exit on this, anything that I saved, anything I uploaded, like the map that I had up there of the walking trail that's being created, is gone. And next time I log in, I have to re-upload it again. So what we're trying to do is prevent having to re-upload every single time you go to show it. It'll automatically be you log in. Any links that you have will automatically populate.
Well, there'd be an area that state of West Virginia does a lot of mitigation on these water areas. Will show mitigated properties.
We're working with them right now. They don't have that, the DEP mitigation people, they don't have that available on a public server yet. But now that they've seen how the DEP or the Watershed Resource Registry would be available, they're trying to move that to a server that can be updated automatically. So if they do a site, it'll automatically be put into the system. But we can only pull what's on a public server. If they have it, well, it's on 6 people's computer because we shared it by flash drive. We're not even going to consider that data until it's ready to be generally available to the public. I think the only catch to that is I think the parcel data gets pulled once a month, just because it's a big layer and they just pull it. And so if it gets updated in the GIS Technical Center, it doesn't necessarily get updated here. So.
I do know the Technical Center, they are improving their interconnectability with everything.
If you have a layer on here that you like, so let's say that the wetland restoration that you decide, hey, we're going to work on, let's build 5 wetlands in this county, but we don't know where we can go. If you click here in the dots and you click on the description, this will give you the link where you can actually access that server, download that data into ArcGIS, and you will have it available as well. You don't have to use the WRR. The link is available for you. So that's something that you might want to consider as well.
That's something you'll have me do a lot.
You can take every piece of data that we have on here can be downloaded through the links directly into your system. So that's a plus. Before it would have taken, well, whenever we went through to do this, we had 21 layers we wanted to find. It took us 4 months of meetings before we found the most accurate, up-to-date maps for those. I mean, that's just because, like I said, the trout layer, for example, everybody had a different definition of what was a trout stream. So we had to find the most accurate definition of what a trout stream was and use that person's map, which turned out to be the DNR. So Any further questions for me before I turn it back over? All right, I'm going to have my business cards as well over here. I'm not leaving though, but if anybody has any questions for me or any stormwater issues related within the state, feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Chad. Okay, so we are 3 minutes ahead of schedule now. So I think we're moving right along here. Actually, no, we're 15 minutes. I apologize. If we wanted to right now, we can take a 15-minute break or so, so everybody can stretch and take a moment. And anybody that's watching, of the 8 participants right now, you can also take a break as well. Everybody ready to do this last one? Okay, we're getting settled back in here. I guess in case anybody has to leave before the end of this next presentation, we do have a little bit of we're leaving the last bit of this open for Q&A, any last minute discussions or anything. But if you do have to leave before this, I'd like to thank you all for attending. This has been a very good day of talking about GIS and being able to converse with a lot of different people from different backgrounds and different fields, and being able to just talk about GIS and local government, GIS in general. And I've really appreciated the input and the interest today. This last presentation is one I've given in several places. It's talking about Oak Hills Needles Eye Park and how GIS helped make it a reality. This park, for those who do not know about Needles Eye Park, it's going to be a nearly 300-acre park that will have climbing, bouldering, which is untethered climbing, mountain biking, hiking, nature walks. There are several different ideas for recreation at this property, and we're really looking forward to seeing the potential it has. Just to go down through this presentation today, it's going to talk about what Needles Eye Park is, a little bit about Oak Hills municipal GIS system, what happened, how we discovered the park, how we ended up exploring the park, and where we stand currently and where we're hoping to be in the future with this recreational mecca, as it's been said. So the Needles Eye Park property, like I said, is 283 acres of undeveloped land, and it has nearly 2 miles of rock cliff on the property itself. The park was a joint conservation venture between the city of Oak Hill and the West Virginia Land Trust, which is a nonprofit entity that's been conserving land all across the state. The park property is located entirely within Oak Hill's corporate limits, and it's approximately 2.5 linear miles from the New River Gorge National River. So it's 2.5 miles as the crow flies, a little bit longer if you're having to drive by car. The planned development for this facility is to have restrooms, trails, mountain biking, climbing access, bouldering access, and a couple other features that we hope to eventually have. And the city manager, Bill Hannabas, once said this has the potential to be an outdoor recreation mecca. And just to briefly go over Oak Hills Municipal GIS, those who have attended today have already seen this pretty much. Began in early 2015 in earnest. We have a GIS coordinator, which is myself. We provide mapping and analytics to each and every department, as shown there: city manager, code enforcement, sanitary board, our public works department, planning and zoning commission, police department, fire department, and several other boards and commissions. Our software used, we use desktop and ArcGIS Pro. I have switched almost entirely to Pro now. We use heavily ArcGIS Online, which means our mobile apps, Arcgis Collector, Arcgis Web App Builder, Survey 123, which is not listed there, but we have gone very deep into using online GIS to produce data and to share data. And just to give you a quick timeline of discovering Needles Eye Park, in early 2015, an annexation was finalized that took over a large swath of land that was part of a takeover of a public service district that was failing in sewer service. And it included the property, and we weren't really that aware of it. And I like to call it a happy accident that it happened. But then late 2015, we were starting to look at a few maps, and we noticed that, wow, there's a large tract of land. There's nothing on it. We didn't really think much of it. But then we started to look at different maps of it that I'll I'll have later, that started to look at, oh, there's some cliff and there's some boulders there. It piqued our interest, and it piqued our city manager's interest, and he really wanted to start looking at it. Come to find out in retrospect, a few locals knew there were boulders and cliffs down there, but it wasn't really widely known. So it was in our backyard and nobody knew about it for the most part. We come to find out it was one tract of land, and it was owned by Berwyn Land Company. And we come to find out it was basically a leftover parcel that had been subdivided multiple times. So the usable land had kept getting chewed off of this parcel until what was left was never going to be developed. It was pretty much a hillside for that matter, and it wasn't ever going to be used. The the property we started to look at Lidar imagery that was from the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection in early 2016. And we developed a 1 meter DEM from the Lidar, and I made a hillshade model, which is a high resolution surface model. And just doing a few odds and ends of analysis, slope analysis, and being able to generate where the cliffs were, able to identify quite a wide swath of cliff line. And you can see approximately 1.5 miles of cliff line was shown to be on the property, with more near or on the property. Several boulders were identified on the property itself, and then the gradual terrain of the property was what surprised us the most, that it was ideal for hiking trails that people could walk and not be exhausted by the end of the day. It wasn't a steep hillside by no means. And we also located two prime locations for parking and trailheads that would allow visitors to be very close to the boulders and also have a pretty good trail hike nearby. And so there were different accesses to each of the park property, and you'll see on the map in a moment how this park can be developed and how we're seeing it to be developed. So just to show a quick map of Needles Eye Park, the black line is the property boundary as it is now. And I even highlighted where Needles Eye Boulder, which is a boulder formation that forms the eye of a needle, which gives it its name. You notice it's nearly central within the park property, but you notice there's a wide swath of property that's not where the boulders and cliffs are, and I'll show in another map here. This is the hillshade model, and this is also known as a surface model. So you see right away the rocks and boulders stand out very well within this model. You see the cliff lines very well. You also see the slope of the terrain, and you also see some flat areas. Namely, in the center of the map, you see one area that would be prime for parking. You see some areas up on the northeastern side that are prime for parking, as they don't appear to be as steep. And then this is known as a slope model. And what this did was analyze that exact same data to provide the angle of slope. So the redder it gets, the steeper or straight down that it gets. So you notice right away, you can see the cliff line really well, and you can see some of the boulders very well. And just to draw that out, only showing the reds and only showing the lines of the cliffs and the boulders, you see really the extent of the boulders. And you notice that's a very small part of this entire property. So there's a lot of this property that doesn't have anything to do with climbing, but could be utilized as mountain biking trails and hiking trails. And now let's get into some visuals. Let's get into some pretty pictures of this place. Not so pretty of the guys in the picture, though. I'm just kidding. So you notice right away, we were collecting images all over the property of different features. The middle one is a cave that we found. There are some boulders that are completely covering and could be argued to be a cave. Massive boulders that are off to themselves, boulders that may be the shape of a camel or a gorilla, depending on how you want to look at it. And so once we saw the maps that I just showed you, we were looking at the Lidar imagery, and we were seeing, oh, wow, there's some really big boulders here and a lot of cliff line. And so in early 2016, my boss, our city manager, Bill Hannabass, took a group to the property, and they surveyed the property. And one of the things that they did was they took a lot of photos through Arcgis Collector, which is a mobile app that I've talked about at length with people that are here in person. But for those that are listening in online, Arcgis Collector is a mobile app provided by Esri that allows you to collect points, and you can collect information. And what we used it for was to collect points and to attach photos to those points. And I'll show that in a moment. But you'll see the results at the bottom here. So we created a map, just a point layer, nothing fancy, enough to where you could write a note saying, okay, this is a big boulder prime for climbing. This is a good parking area. This could be a good trailhead. And we ended up collecting 107 points with over 150 photos in total in just the initial collection. And this was over one to three trips, I believe. Bill, you're looking at me. You correct me if I'm wrong there. We collected a few more on subsequent trips, 53 more photos for access roads and trailheads and parking areas. And it ended up being a pretty substantial map of just all of this information. And it's all just in photos, but it's a ton of information. And we were able to conceptualize trails from this, a mainline trail and branch trails. We were also able to kind of confirm it from aerial imagery as well, because we saw some existing ATV trails and other routes that have been used in the past. And we were able to co-opt them in some regards to use them for future trails. And as of now, we have potential trails totaling 4 miles within the park. We have some of those already developed. We do have a mainline route that had been cut and developed over the summer. So just to show you this map, each of those camera icons constitute at least one photo taken. Some of those do have multiple photos per point, but you can get the gist of how much we've surveyed and how much we have not surveyed of the property. You notice there's a pretty wide void to the southeast part of the property that we have yet to explore, and we plan to in the near term. And so from those photo points, we were able to conceptualize trail route or conceptual trail routes. And I can tell you definitively the trail that wraps around and comes all the way over to Needles Eye Boulder from this top side is open to the public now. The route may have differed from this since this was just a concept, but there is an existing trail out to Needles Eye Boulder from the top side, which is up here. So where we stand, in August 2016, Oak Hill committed $25,000 towards the purchase of the property in partnership with the West Virginia Land Trust. In January 2017, the West Virginia Land Trust announced that they received $602,000 from the Outdoor Heritage Conservancy Fund to survey and purchase the property from Berwyn Land Company. About almost a year later, the property purchase was completed and closed, and even announced by the Land Trust. And we, in fact, held a ceremony in May of 2018 that was basically meant to say the park is here, the park is open, but it is still very much in its development infancy. And we are expecting late this year, early next year, to have it officially conveyed from the West Virginia Land Trust to the city of Oak Hill with a conservation easement that will be permanently assigned to the property, which means thou shalt not sell it or develop it or do anything that would harm the conservation efforts of the property. So our current planning, as I've shown with the trail maps, we are doing some funding activities. We applied for abandoned mine lands recently. We come to find out we did not receive that grant, but we will be applying for it again. we are identifying other financial routes to try to fund the development of the property. We do have northern parking area is no longer planned to be completed, but it is completed. It has been paved, and the trailhead to that parking area is open. We have been marking more trail routes. Volunteer service efforts have cut a very good route to Needles Eye Boulder now, but there are more trail routes being planned. And we've had some ongoing meetings, ongoing discussions with community groups, New River Association of Climbers, the New River Gorge Trail Alliance as well, have been very involved in the development of this property. And so we're working together with several groups to know how to regulate this property and preserve it so generations after us can climb and explore the property just as we have. And then we also have a 3D master plan available online. It is accessible through our open data page, which if anybody's interested, you can contact me. I will be able to provide you the link to that if you do not have access to our open data page. But just in case you don't, here's a little taste of it and some 3D models put in, and it is conceptual. It isn't exactly reality, but close enough just to get the gist across. In fact, right here's the link, but for those watching and those sitting here, if you remember that, you're very much a genius, and I'm not. So just to wrap this up a little bit, what we're planning to in the future, we're wanting to complete main trail beyond Needles Eye Formation and get to all ends of the park property. We need long-term plans for managing and regulating the park, comprehensive planning. We're getting into that in the near future, talking about zoning ordinances and mapping and being able to best conserve the property, but also plan for development around the park's periphery, possibly, or outside the city as well. We've talked to the county about that as well. And then one of the big plans is that we plan for Needles Eye Park to be connected to a larger trail network that is being spearheaded by the New River Gorge Trail Alliance. And then also we are in the process of beginning to research potential economic impacts of the park and climbing being able to be available at the park. So to wrap up the conclusion for today, the analytical power of GIS is a big reason why Needles Eye Park, why we even know about it today. And we did that before we even stepped foot on the property to know what was even there. We had an idea that Lidar provided us that there was something there to see, and we took a look at it. And then being able to use ArcGIS online and the mobile apps that they provided a very quick, painless, easy method to collect all of these pictures, all of this information for the park, and be able to understand what all the park will have to offer. And just to drive the point home, GIS has and will continue to be crucial to developing this park. And it's continuing to be as we continue to collect more information and as we continue to provide mapping to the public in terms of planning, and also with the 3D master plan, being able to bring out concepts to people in a very visually pleasing method. So with that, I'll show off some more photos of the property for those watching and those here in the audience. And I'll take a moment to answer any questions and take any comments. Yes, sir.
Adam had asked Sam and I to go about possible connection with the property there, see if there is connection. They can work in the main street or indoor there. We couldn't really find it in there because it put down in that section.
Yep.
But I just wanted to double check and see if you guys have found it. We looked and we ran into the same. Getting close to aggravating, but
the question for those watching at home was there was talk about possibly connecting the trail on the western end or the left side of this photo. The concept was that we could try to tie that into Main Street, but we realized pretty quickly that there are a lot of cliff between there and Main Street that we would have to try to navigate, and it's going to be pretty difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but we would have to find the funding to, one, get a path to Main Street, and then also to develop a good access point once we get there. And I'm being asked to go back to the hillshade model. One more. There we go. Were there any questions regarding the hillshade? Okay. Yeah, and I know it kind of goes off the map here a little bit, but Main Street is probably way over here at the edge of the screen. And there are a couple of houses in between us, but right behind those houses is all cliff, and it's probably 80 to 100 feet in places. I would argue, like, it's very, very steep, and it's like straight down drop, and there's not an easy way to get there without a lot of planning and a lot of effort and a lot of funding to do it. Any more questions? Let me skip on back just for those watching at home in case anybody wanted to see those pictures some more. Anybody that is watching at home and those that are here, this pretty much ends the presentations for today. We do have a couple of minutes left today. It was a little after 3:30 or so. If anybody has any ideas in the audience here today, I'll be free to talk to you about it. We can wrap this up about 4 o'clock, but for those watching at home, I'm going to stop recording now, and I want to thank you all for watching and attending today. This will be available on YouTube if you are willing to go back and watch, and I apologize for the audio difficulties earlier. I hope we did figure that out. So thank you all for attending. Thank you.